Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about how to automate off of VMware with the VMware migrations.
Considering a cloud transformation or migration? Check out the Total Guide to Private Cloud from Mirantis to learn how open source cloud on-prem gives you cloud benefits without the downsides. Download now at mirantis.com/privatecloud.
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Michael Tilman from Mirantis, and I'm joined with my colleague Kevin from Trillio. And Kevin, if you'd like to introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
hi everyone. Kevin Jackson, Senior Director of Product Management at Trillio. I'll be taking you through the exciting world of moving from VMware into Mirantis. First back over to Michael.
Why are we here today? And I think everyone is well aware of what's been going on within the marketplace and basically what it is that people are talking about, and that's, is VMware still the right solution for your organization? And if it is not, then we need to speak about having some other type of solution. And actually, that's the Mirantis solution. And we're going to talk today about how you can leverage Trillio to migrate your workloads off of VMware onto the Mirantis platform. What we're looking at here is basically, I want to explain the business value of the Mirantis OpenStack solution, and realistically, there's a couple of different aspects that I want to talk to about, and that's not just the customer experience, because that is very important, but we also provide the time to market, the agility, the flexibility, and how you can basically increase your operational efficiency. So how do we achieve that? And that's through the architectural control, whether it be regulatory, whether it's your scale and performance, or whether it's your reliability. There are multiple things that we can use in our solution, but there's also this idea of speed and agility and the commercial optionality, and that is our open source first and open source based solution, and the cloud native principles that we use within our platform and within our solution. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't make mention of the ROI, and that is, of course, what we do is we allow you to leverage and utilize all of the resources that you have inside of your ecosystem. The access to innovation that we use based upon all of the open source projects, and that allows you to have a much more mature open source project, and without losing any of the technological capabilities that you are experiencing currently. So I want to talk just a little bit here about what some of the use cases that you might be seeing, and how we would address those use cases with OpenStack. Just looking at some of the use cases along the top, and not only from a containerization, but the virtualization that everyone is very familiar with, and why you would need to be able to address this specific use case. Infrastructure as a service, of course, the IaaS is inevitably what OpenStack is and what it provides your organization, not only from a business standpoint, but from a technological standpoint as well. Multi-cloud is another use case that we also can leverage with OpenStack: edge, high performance, data science, application modernization, and of course, in the regulated space. There's multiple use cases, of course, underneath each one of these, but these are just some of the use cases that you can expect that we would be able to address with our OpenStack solution. I'll be talking more about that here in just 1 second. But the virtual machines, bare metal, and then of course the networking services and the storage options that we can leverage with our OpenStack solution. So just to talk just a little bit about what some of the components that we have, and again, these are open source components. And the main thing that I want to point out here is that in the middle, where the Mirantis Kubernetes engine, this is a Kubernetes based orchestrator. And realistically, what we're looking at here is Mirantis OpenStack is just another workload that is being orchestrated via Kubernetes. I do want to speak just a moment about the SDN. We have two separate types of solutions that we can address from an SDN perspective, and that is OVS and Tungsten Fabric. Depending on your use case, those would be something that we can absolutely and are part of our solution. The SDS, or the software-defined storage, we have other options available as well, but Ceph is our recommended storage unit. But we do have integrations into other solutions as well. If you have an existing storage backend that you would like to use or that you would like to leverage or are existing, then of course we can have the integration into those as well. The OSS from the perspective on the right is again just another marketing moniker that we have. Stacklight is again our logging, monitoring, and alerting OSS, and that is comprised of a myriad of different open source projects, and we can have a discussion about those much further in detail if you would like. So from a very high level, those are the main components that are being orchestrated via Kubernetes. And on the left-hand side, you would notice the Mirantis Container Cloud, and that is what we use for the bare metal hosted OS, and again, the Kubernetes cluster management. And this is also another one of our open source projects that we leverage to be able to offer you added optionality when it comes to your containerization and your virtualization from a compute standpoint and from a Kubernetes cluster standpoint. So really now what I want to talk about is the deployment options for each specific use case. And what we're looking at here is depending upon what your use case is, we do have the supported cloud configuration and how we would address each of these. So just looking at and spending time with customers such as yourself, and depending upon your requirements and your use case, we would come and design the cloud specifically to you. And then we would have this cloud and supported cloud configuration. So for example, for your specific use case, if you had a high networking workload, we would come with the cloud provider with Tungsten Fabric. Or if you had an edge use case, we would have a remote compute with those edge capabilities. And if you're more storage centric, of course, we could come in and deploy these OpenStack solutions in a Cephless or a hyperconverged standpoint. And all of these are supported cloud configurations depending upon, of course, your requirements for what it is that you're wanting to export. Then, of course, we have the supported cloud configurations based upon your use case and, more importantly, the cloud design that is going to be tailored to your specific use case. So what's the true value of Kubernetes, and why do we have the control plane for our OpenStack solution on Kubernetes? And we could speak for multiple hours on this and the value of Kubernetes, and everyone at this point is pretty much aware of the value of Kubernetes. But realistically, what we would like to point out here is that a couple of different things. From a developer standpoint, you get high reliability and availability, and we allow you to leverage this as end users to be able to spin up and tear down and deploy your applications seamlessly and cohesively into your ecosystem. From an operator standpoint, reduced complexity is huge, and everyone knows that and a happy operator is an operator that can reduce the complexity and simplify the lifecycle management. And Kevin is going to be speaking more about that in just a second, and how we can accommodate moving those workloads off of VMware onto our solution. And again, just speaking a little bit more about the value of Kubernetes, the isolation of components, of course, and giving you as developers and as operators the declarative state through the ability to use, launch, and deploy the Kubernetes Helm charts, and to be able to automatically reconcile all of those resources and all of those components. And so really what we're looking at here is we allow you to be able to deliver these services that enable speed for your enterprise. And just looking from top down is we have a standardized virtual machine orchestration The OpenStack control plane basically provides the solution that abstracts away the deployment and the management of those virtual machines, and thus the dependencies behind just a standard API. We don't do anything to make the APIs more complex. We have just a standard set of APIs. That means you can integrate directly into those APIs and dramatically reduce the time taken to be able to spin up and spin down and provide those new virtual machines or containers to your customers, be it internal or external. So we provide that to you natively. The infrastructure abstraction, of course, is we deliver the abstraction of those data center resources, be it compute, networking, storage, whatever, and it makes it much more easier for operators to be able to deliver those resources to your developers in a more efficient manner. And it leads to operations to have much more time to be able to do things that make sense for their business, because they're not spending all of their time filling out or providing these resources to the developers. Again, one other thing that I would like to point out is this increased hardware utilization. It supports basically a more efficient use of your data center hardware resources, and basically by increasing the number of server systems that your hardware can support. So it's the utilization of those expenditures that you have in hardware. And again, just kind of wanting to talk about the workload isolation. OpenStack as well as Kubernetes supports multi-tenancy, and it gives you better, safer, and more secure isolation of your workloads. I could talk just a second about the services associated with OpenStack, but it's basically just the standardization of not only your hardware resources, but your software and virtualized resources through standard orchestration. And now I'd like to hand it over to Kevin and allow him to talk you through how we would get you from VMware onto this exact platform. Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to say and I'm okay saying this. I'm old in the tooth when it comes to OpenStack and IT, but I was in that camp of when you hear like running OpenStack with Kubernetes. I was in that camp of like, why would you add that level of complexity? Why would you add that level of thing into something where Kubernetes then runs into? But honestly, it absolutely makes sense. When you have this idea that a control plane are web services, and being able to have those rolling updates, having the ability to that most OpenStack deployments are containerized anyway. And what's a really good containerized orchestration engine? Well, it's Kubernetes. So yeah, Michael, in terms of like Mirantis OpenStack, it fits really, really well, with how people want to use OpenStack and how they want to scale. And of course, moving from VMware into that platform is obviously a very sensible thing to do these days. So I'm gonna take you through where Trillio comes into this puzzle of moving from VMware into Mirantis OpenStack. What Trillio for VMware to Mirantis OpenStack is a specific solution designed for admins to essentially pull in the workloads from VMware. It is directly integrated into the experience of OpenStack. So if you're familiar with OpenStack and you're familiar with the Horizon interface, you'll find us directly integrated into that experience. What Michael showed before in terms of the deployment components, Trillio gets deployed as one of those other components. So it just sits beside Glance, just sits beside Nova and all the other services. So we're not a third-party tool that has a big catalog that worked with various, solutions. This is very, very dedicated for the experience of OpenStack. And of course, we've got a tool now that brings the experience of bringing workloads from VMware directly into OpenStack. If you don't like the Horizon, you can use the command line. So again, because Trillio is a fully It's a full service from OpenStack. It only knows about OpenStack. This particular product is an OpenStack service. So you're going to get an API. You're going to get the command line client. So of course, if you want to use that in that kind of way, of course, drop to the command line and manage your migrations in that fashion. So what do we have? Well, obviously, as part of moving from VMware to OpenStack, you have to make decisions. VMware is a platform that is single tenancy. It's the domain of administrators. It's the world of infrastructure-based virtualization, and it's very good at what it does. The world's moved on. The world's moved on into the world of cloud. It's a different way of managing virtual infrastructure. Obviously, OpenStack brings a lot of additional capabilities for self-service management, lifecycle management of virtual machines. We've got to be able to map between VMware, that world that people have known for quite a number of years and a couple of decades, to be fair, and move them into a world of OpenStack, which is a cloud platform. So moving from infrastructure to infrastructure as a service. In OpenStack, the world really exists within four walls, known as a tenant or a project. And so what Trillio brings is the ability to map various virtual machines, various networks, various storage types and flavors, and all the additional things that are required to run things in OpenStack. You're able to map them into your OpenStack cloud, into individual tenants, bring over security groups, bring over networks, map different networks from VMware into like vSwitch networks into OpenStack. Different storage is presented in a slightly different way than data stores. So you're able to map data stores to the mappings, say through Cinder using Trillio. We get a lot of conversations where we're moving lots of workloads. So the UI is really good for the familiarity, going through the process of being able to bring in workloads from VMware and do that mapping exercise. In fact, we actually have another tool in the works which allows you to do a lot of mapping in a pre-planning phase, and then take the output of that pre-planning phase into the world of an API or the command line client. The tool I'm showing you today is directly integrated into the Horizon experience from Mirantis OpenStack. And that's the tool. It's kind of like one step beyond. And I'll show you the final throes of the migration in a demonstration that's coming up. And then, of course, because we're Trillio is data protection, backbone recovery for OpenStack. So, of course, once you've brought those workloads over into OpenStack, I'm pretty sure that the decision, when people are making the decision from moving from VMware to OpenStack, they're not doing it because they love the world of open source, which, of course, is a big, a big drive for a lot of people. But people are making a decision around the fact that, look, this is my important workloads. I need to make sure that there is full lifecycle management. I need to make sure that there are data operations, like being able to back up and recover those workloads. And then, so our product, from bringing over workloads from VMware into OpenStack, you can now continue to protect those workloads using the same tool, the same trust from Trillio running on Mirantis OpenStack. So how do we go? So we've got the design philosophy of what a migration is for Trillio is the fact that it's a process. It's a process whereby you will identify the virtual machines that you want to bring over into Mirantis OpenStack. I should point out at this point, the reason why this is in this circular motion is the fact that there will be decisions that get made at each point. So, for example, you'll be identifying virtual machines that you want to bring over into VMware. You'll be placing them into various tenants. They will have various flavors. If you're new to OpenStack, I apologize if I'm preaching to the converted already. But flavors basically describe the size of those virtual machines. So in VMware, they're the resources of CPU, storage, and disk and RAM. Sorry, they map to an object called flavors in the world of OpenStack. But because you're moving from one type of infrastructure and a way of working into the world of OpenStack, you want to tune the migration. You want to tune those VMs and make sure that they're running as expected. So we expect basically a process whereby it's a case of move, test, and then move to production. And if that doesn't work, then you go and reconfigure. So you go through this process of mapping, testing, reconfiguring, and then eventually get to the stable state of being able to say that this is my set of virtual machines now running as good as they should be, with all the expectations of security, all the expectations of the performance, and has all the access requirements. You can have that in that safety of this whole type of process. So our tool allows this ongoing life cycle type of process where you can identify the virtual machines, bring them over, and when you're happy, then you can move on. And then, of course, you can scale this out through orchestration and automation. So how do we do this? So I've used the word mapping quite a lot. So that mapping for us basically allows us to describe something from a VMware land and moving them into an OpenStack land. The terminology is different, but the technology is pretty similar. To do that, we have these things called a migration plan. So what happens in a migration plan is you identify the sets of virtual machines or the grouping of virtual machines that you want to assign to a particular tenant. A tenant can have multiple migration plans. A migration plan might describe a cluster of virtual machines associated with a particular service. It might be a web service layer. It could be a SQL Server layer running on Windows VMs. Or it could be a mixture of two, because you might want to leave services up on VMware, for example, for the duration of the migration. So there's a lot of ways you can group these virtual machines to bring over into the world of OpenStack. But that grouping for us is known as a migration plan. So essentially, these migration plans get executed inside of these tenants. So the administrator can set up these migration plans. And so on the screen here, we've got some virtual machines running on VMware. We'll add these to this particular migration plan. And if you can see here, we're moving from this more of a landscape, which is, I know it's not quite accurate, but it's almost like a single tenancy. I know people carve these things out into the groups of ESX hosts and things of that nature. In OpenStack, they're actually kind of like host aggregates. So again, you can get the same level of physical isolation if you wanted to. That's actually within the realms of OpenStack itself. That's the realms of Michael working with the likes of Trillio, working with the likes of you as a customer to work out what that architecture really looks like. But when it comes to the actual software element of mapping things into where they should be, it's this software element that Trillio comes in with this migration plan. And so essentially, I know this is just an animation, and we can show you this in a demonstration that's coming up fairly soon. But essentially, you do just bring in these virtual machines into the world of OpenStack. And so at this point, we go through a process, as you would expect. We're creating those security groups. We're creating those virtual networks. We're making sure the fact that these disks that are running in VMware are the appropriate format for running in Mirantis OpenStack, converting them to the right hypervisor. There's VMware guest tools that are running on VMware. Obviously, they're not needed when you move into the world of OpenStack. Be a QEMU guest agent that would then be running on those particular virtual machines. So the migration tool handles that kind of conversion behind the scenes. And you as an administrator, all you need to do is just identify how you want to bring these workloads over. And then have them running in the environment. But I will stress at this point, even though if I continue this animation, these things disappear. These things will disappear once you're ready. It's really, really important to understand the fact that this is actually a copy process. We are taking workloads that are running in VMware, and we can migrate them over into OpenStack. We use the Trillio technology. How we do our backup and recovery is essentially the engine behind the scenes that actually feeds this migration process. But it's essentially a snapshot and a copy process. Now, why is that important? If I just come back one step, that's very important because this does allow the safety of being able to roll back. This does allow the safety of being able to say, actually, is this the right thing to do? Because as the other part of this conversation, which is not in this particular webinar, which we can have in the future, is the fact that there are certain conversations that you will be having in the case of, is lift and shift the right thing to do? There's a great deal of conversation to have in terms of for the 80% of my environment is going to be a lift and shift. For the other 80%, for the other 20%, honestly, I can do maths. For the other 20%, you might be having conversations of like, okay, well, maybe I'll run a native database running on my OpenShift cluster. I might deploy a Kubernetes cluster from Mirantis running on my OpenStack virtual machines. And I might bring in a native Postgres operator-based database running in there. And instead of migrating the virtual machines, you might just want to migrate the data in there as well. So there's conversations to be had around this. Just so again, the flexibility is there. You are fully in control over how you want to migrate stuff. The tool that we're bringing you here that brings into the world of Mirantis OpenStack is the fact that we can actually take those virtual machines and lift and shift them and bring them into OpenStack when you're ready. And then eventually you get to a place where you can retire your VMware estate, and that's usually the end goal. Well, halfway through the webinar, so it's about time that I showed you a demonstration. So slightly less talking, although I'll be talking through over this. So the demonstration that's coming up, a little disclaimer, if I just move it on one slide, it is pre-recorded. The only difference with what I'm going to show you and a live demonstration is I took the liberty of shortening the migration step. The migration step isn't particularly long, but you'll appreciate that if we've got gigs of data running on VMware, all you'll be doing is hearing some really poor dad jokes for about 2 or 3 minutes, just whilst the migration occurs, in this particular demonstration. So I've just taken the liberty of shrinking that. Everything else is real time. It's just the migration step itself I just shrunk in terms of time, and so that's why this is a video. I'll be talking over this as we go through. So normal logging into Mirantis OpenStack. So if you're not familiar, this is the lovely world of Horizon. This is your self-service OpenStack platform where you can create your lovely virtual machines and run your services that make your business a lot of money. There's a backups tab on there because we're Trillio. So that's where we also as part of this solution. But if we go down to the migration tab, this is where the migration happens. And in here, this is where we can create a migration plan directly within this particular tenant. So in this case, I've been very original. I've called this migration plan the webinar migration. And I'm just choosing a random virtual machine in this environment. You can add in any number of virtual machines to a migration plan. For the sake and simplicity of what I was showing you here, I've just added a single virtual machine rather than cherry picking a number of virtual machines. You get and let me just pause this just for one single moment. You get the ability to actually choose which virtual machines to actually do the migration during the migration stage. All this stage here is saying that this is a group of virtual machines that I'm adding to this particular migration plan. In this case, I've added one. I could have added 100. But when it comes to the actual migration, I could have cherry-picked 3 virtual machines if I wanted to. So I want to make that really clear. The migration plan allows you to group your virtual machines together. And then it's in stages. We go through this stage of this tool. It basically talks to vCenter. It gets a list of the virtual machines that are present on VMware. So of course we need access to VMware. This is a direct access to VMware architecture. This Mirantis OpenStack cluster will have API access, or the tool, the service, where the migration services is running on the control plane. It needs access to the API of vCenter. So we're making API calls, we're listing all the virtual machines, and that allows us to pick and choose which virtual machines to bring over. The next step, which was just happening just then, is we do a discover the virtual machines phase. The discover virtual machine basically goes through, and I'm going to stop this again, goes through and based on the group of virtual machines that I've pre-selected, goes and does a deeper level of discovery. So the first stage does it at high level. What VMs and what basic information about the data stores are available on the virtual machines? When I clicked the Discover Virtual Machines button, it goes through and looks at the virtual machines that I specifically chosen, and it goes and does a deeper level of analysis. It understands things like the the networks that were associated with it. It understood the data stores it's associated with it. You can see that's for efficiency reasons. We basically, it's a level of high level. We get the VMs fast, and then we get more details about what we actually want and we care about by doing a deeper level of analysis. So at this stage, we're about to perform an actual migration. So I'm going to give the migration a name. Like everything in cloud, everything has to have names. So again, I'm very imaginative. Give it a webinar migration time. Whilst I'm on this part of the demonstration, we support a variety of migration options. We have the ability to do a dry run. A dry run is basically a test. The dry run does actually create objects in OpenStack, but it doesn't do anything to do with quiescing the disk or any touching of powering off the disk and any finalization of the data when we bring over the disk from VMware to OpenStack. So it's really useful to start using the dry run in terms of sizing, get an idea of what's going on in terms of like the capacity, getting an idea of like the mappings of your virtual machines to OpenStack Neutron networking. It's a really good tool to basically just say, I'm just concentrating on OpenStack, but please don't touch any of the data, which we do touch the data. We basically just do a copy, but it's like a dirty copy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. If you're familiar with with the world of storage, well, all I'm saying there is we're not waiting for a quiesced disk to get the data. We're just going to grab the data as it is and bring it over. So it's really good enough to just say VMware's just doing what it's good at, and we're going to just concentrate on OpenStack, and allows us to fine tune how we're going to do the actual real life migrations. The real life migrations can be done in two ways. So that's the cold and the warm. So in this demonstration, we're going to show you a cold migration. So I'll start with that. The cold migration essentially would power off the VMware virtual machine. The principle here is the fact that we want to get the data copied as quickly as possible. So you can appreciate for the demonstration, that's really good. I want to show you, everybody on this call, I want to get that VMware VM migrated as quickly as possible. So I chose the cold migration for this demonstration. And what it'll do is it talks to the vCenter API. It goes and talks to that random, I think it was Ubuntu virtual machine. It'll go and power it off. Once it's in a power off state, it's really nice, right? I can go and do a snapshot of that data and go and bring over the data and bring it into the world of OpenStack. So I can do that because I can, and it's part of this particular demonstration. Now, but even in the reality, this is really useful for those scenarios where you can afford that downtime. You can actually say, or maybe it's a requirement of the downtime. Bearing in mind that there's a lot of the IT organization cares about the VMware to OpenStack migration, but I reckon there's a lot of the business which just says I just need my VMs accessible, and sometimes there's SLAs kind of like put on by the customer or your users, and so there could be an SLA or some kind of like restriction that says, look, I'm only going to give you a 2-hour window, and I need my virtual machines up and running again. In which case, you want to have that migration finish as quickly as possible. So cold does that. The cold is it's the most intrusive because we're powering off a virtual machine. You're going to get downtime, but because it's down, we can copy the data fast. Now, for those other scenarios where you just can't afford that level of downtime, you want the world where your existing services are taking traffic. Your existing services are writing data to a database or to some disk. It might be a file server, whatever it is. And so you can choose the warm migration option. The warm migration option basically allows you to we'll take multiple snapshots of the VM from VMware. So we're making calls into vCenter. We're asking for the disk. We're asking for a snapshot, and we'll do that periodically. And then at the final step, we'll ask for the final bit of data. But the idea is we're drip feeding the incremental data over onto OpenStack. So you'll appreciate that that's the least intrusive type of migration. But if you think about like a duration, obviously we're drip feeding data. So that's going to be the longest. But it's good for uptime. And if you can cater for like a longer tail for the actual data to migrate over into OpenStack, that's the option you would choose, the warm migration. So I'm going to continue the thing here. In fact, I think I actually paused this video a little bit just to talk about this, but they're the options. And I say for this, I'm going to choose the cold migration. So I'll pause the video again. In terms of the network mapping, remember I said before, everything we're doing here is all about mapping. We've got objects which are very relevant to Open VMware, and there's objects and mapping that need to occur to run in the world of OpenStack. So in this case, we've taken the we've understood that this particular virtual machine has just a single network, attached to this, imaginatively called internal network in VMware. So if you looked at your network tab and you saw networks in there, that's the networks that we're reading. And so at this point, you can map these to any of your OpenStack networks. So if you've got multiple OpenStack networks that exist in this particular tenant, you can map those networks now to the appropriate tenant equivalent in the world of OpenStack. Because we're starting this journey a little bit further on, because it's directly related into the world of Mirantis OpenStack and the Horizon dashboard, we have actually got a pre-planning tool, which is close to coming out, which allows us to actually map and create those networks ahead of time as well. So watch out for that at a later date. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I pressed the wrong button. Let's go back over here. I'm a professional, really. So we're on the networking stage. So we're mapping this vSwitch network over into the world of OpenStack. And I'm choosing this particular tenant network in my environment. Now, just like the mapping of networks to networks in OpenStack, we can map data stores into the world of OpenStack. Now, of course, the world of OpenStack, those data stores, those block storage volumes, are presented through the world of Cinder. So what we're seeing here is what we do is we read the Cinder types that are available on the system. And at this point, you can map the appropriate data store into OpenStack. So at this point, we're saying, this vSwitch, this data store, this virtual machine had disks. It was based on this particular data store, which please don't even question why, we just click next when creating data stores and we end up with data store 3 brackets 2. That's not for anybody's judgment on this call. But the principle here is, when we do go into the world of OpenStack, it's a little bit more sensible. We've got something called Ceph. We've got something where we've got encrypted Ceph and things of that nature. So this is where we do that particular mapping, of course. And again, I told you this, all we're doing here is it's all about the mapping. So at this point, I'm going to choose my Ceph storage, which will map the VMs associated with this particular VM to that. Now, last thing I'll just show you before I click that Migrate button is, remember I said before, you can add a number of virtual machines into the migration plan. This is where you now select what we're going to actually migrate from VMware into OpenStack. So in this case, as I said, there's one. It just makes this demonstration a lot easier. But the nice thing about this particular tool as well is we've worked out, based on the resources that were presented from VMware, we've mapped the one, you can see the name. We keep the name, of course, but you have the option here to change the name if you so desire. In fact, arguably, given the fact that this random one is dev test Ubuntu 18, I would recommend that this should have been renamed to something else. But when it comes to the flavors, what we've done is we've looked up vCenter. We've seen the number of CPUs available. We've seen the amount of RAM. We've seen the amount of storage. And what we do is we do a little bit of fuzzy logic. We work out the closest mapping flavor associated with that particular sizing, and we pick the flavor for you. You can choose the flavor. You can see that's a drop down. You can choose and override what we think is the right size for this particular virtual machine. But just bear in mind that we do sensibly make good choices for you in here. So yes, so again, you can override this if you so desire. In this case, the M1 large was the right one. If you had multiple availability zones, then you can, of course, also choose them at this point. So for those who are at the beginning of the OpenStack journey, honestly, I am very jealous of you. I've been 13, 14 years of OpenStack. I've seen it all. If you're just moving into OpenStack now, you get a lovely, serene world of like, no problems and a lovely architecture and things just work. So I'm very jealous if you are just new into the world of OpenStack or relatively new. So if you are, and fresh-faced, availability zones basically allow you to map out where your virtual machines live on your physical nodes. So you might have a big estate, and you might want to carve out your compute nodes into various groups. They're basically availability zones. Obviously, directly from the world of cloud, which allows you to say, hey, look, I want a bit of web server in 1, 2, and 3. So if one AZ goes down, then the other 2 are available. But people use them these days really or a lot of them, to separate, capabilities. Like, I don't know, GPUs in one to do your AI stuff and things of that nature. But anyway, this is where you can also map. In this particular example, this is a small environment. There's only one availability zone. It's the default Nova. So I'm happy with this. So what happens now is I click the Migrate button. So this is the bit which I sped up, by the way. This is the bit which basically goes through, and instead of waiting 2 or 3 minutes for the migration, I condense it down into a much smaller time. So during this phase, this is where we go through and we actually do that disk conversion. So you can imagine we're taking a disk, we're reading the data, we are doing the migration from a VMDK. We're going to put it into a QCOW2 or the appropriate RAW or whatever the appropriate storage is, and we end up with a running virtual machine. And there's our running virtual machine. It's that horribly named virtual machine. It's got all what you would expect in here. And if I click on the console tab, we will see a nice running Ubuntu instance. That would possibly be my DNS server. It could possibly be my Postgres server. But this is the end result from the demonstration. Into day 2. So day 0, your VMware world. Day 1, Michael talked around the world of Mirantis OpenStack and all the advantages you get around running Kubernetes-based control plane and all the services you get attached with Mirantis OpenStack. But with Trillio, we don't just stop at the migration phase. Of course, we're fully integrated into Mirantis OpenStack. So Trillio for Mirantis OpenStack, it's a dedicated service. It's an actual OpenStack service. Everything in OpenStack is essentially an individual service. So that service really does one job. The exception is kind of like Keystone, which kind of like does 2, but everybody just sees that as identity or authentication. Nova manages compute, Neutron does the networking, Cinder does the storage. Well, Trillio does the backup and recovery. So we're not some alien kind of like third-party tool again, which sits at the side, says, "Oh yeah, I know how to do OpenStack because I can understand APIs." We're actually part of OpenStack itself. You install us as part of Mirantis OpenStack. You will see us in the endpoint list. If you're a user and did an OpenStack catalog list, you will see the fact that there are endpoints and there's a Trillio endpoint and service that are running in there. So basically, you add us to the cloud, and basically we just get lit up as a brand new service. We integrate into the Horizon dashboard, like I showed you before. And I've got a couple of screenshots. Rather than a video, it's just easier to show the screenshots on the next couple of pages. But again, fully OpenStack service with a full open API, full command line available. So whatever you can do in terms of backup and recovery, you can do. You can do what you can achieve in Horizon, you can achieve on the command line, if not more. So just like there's a Nova command line client, just like there's a Glance or the universal OpenStack command line client, Trillio is part of that whole ecosystem itself. We're fully agentless by default. So once you brought your VMware VMs over, this might be new to some. I know that agents run and can continue to run. They're just another process that will run in terms of virtual machines and still connect back to your existing, infrastructure-based storage solution. But moving into the world of OpenStack, we can do away with the agents. We don't need that agents. Now we can take advantage of the native QEMU guest agent, just like there's a native VMware guest tools. There's an equivalent guest tools through QEMU, which gets installed as well. We can take advantage of that to do application level backup and recovery. So in other words, if you've got a Postgres database or a MySQL on there, you want to do some quiescing, making sure the data is flushed from cache to disk, we can take advantage of that as well. But apart from that, we're fully agentless. We just make API calls to do what we need to do. And if you read all the blurb on the right hand side there, you can see the fact that we use an open source format. It's QCOW2 because that's the native format of OpenStack itself. all the properties you'd expect from that is what we take advantage of to allow us to do incremental backups. We can just write out the changed data, and we can actually store it as a native QCOW block storage file. And the nice thing about it being a native block storage file in a QCOW2 format is it essentially becomes really, really useful when it comes to recovery. We have a number of ways to do recovery of data from VM running on OpenStack with Trillio protecting it. We can do various types of recoveries, including file level recovery as well. Again, completely agentless. This is what it looks like. You saw this in terms of, well, you saw the migration tab. And that's why I didn't want to do a demonstration again. It's almost like a variation on the same theme. But just give you a little snapshot of, when we clicked on the backups tab. If you see the backups tab in Mirantis OpenStack, that'll be Trillio in there. And the life begins at the world of workloads. Workloads is what you describe as what I'm going to back up. So in this case, I've created a workload called VMware VMs. Guess what? It's going to have that infamous, terribly named virtual machine I brought over as part of this particular backup. And there we go. So we got all the details now. So the principle here is I can bring over workloads from VMware using Trillio. I can now just do the complete management of, given the fact that Mirantis can do with the whole, infrastructure lifecycle management of the platform itself. This is just the icing on the cake where we're able to do backup and recovery. And bear in mind, despite the fact that this is, I have logged in as admin on this, I want to really, really stress the point when it comes to the backup and recovery point. This is user backup as a service. This is your users being able to log into their tenant to manage their virtual machines, their networking, their storage. If they have the ability to create their virtual machines, they have the ability to delete their virtual machines. They're fully responsible for their virtual machines. So therefore, they should also be responsible for the backup of the virtual machines. So that's what Trillio brings. It's a full self-service backup and recovery tool, which allows a variety of ways of doing recovery into the world of Mirantis OpenStack.
Perfect. Yeah. So one thing that I do want to point out here for the audience is to please make, if you have the time, to please make arrangements to join us for our other up and coming webinars. As you can see here on the screen, we've got 2 coming up, one on 26 June and one other on 25 June. And again, those are from some of my colleagues here at Mirantis, and we would really appreciate and would enjoy if you joined us on those tech talks as well. So I think with a minute and a half left in this webinar, I think unless Kevin, if you've got something else that you'd like to add, I'm done rambling, and I appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah, no, I haven't got anything apart from dad jokes, so it's probably good that we've only got a minute and a half left. So I'd probably go because we'll reminisce about OpenStack over the years as well. But yeah, no, apart from that, thank you very much for listening and joining us today. But and thank you to Mirantis for allowing me to ramble with you.
I appreciate it, Kevin, and thanks everyone for your time. I hope it was useful.
Thank you.